Welcome. I'm Kinetic Symphony. I hunt down and report on mysterious and weird, true stories, from glitches to the paranormal. Case file number 512, written by Brandon the DJ. Secrets of my Husky, gaining 100 IQ points. One day I was taking a shower at my flat. Everyone was gone and it was just me and my roommate's Husky. I was in my shower, just casually enjoying the warm water, and the dog started barking a ton. At first I assumed someone was probably at the door, so I got out and began to put a towel on, just in case someone was actually at the door. While I was doing so, the dog was barking more and more, but then the barking changed into perfect English, and the dog was yelling these words, "I just want to be let outside, please let me out." I literally backed away from the bathroom door and exclaimed, "What the hell?" I ran outside the bathroom to see the dog barking with his paws up on the back door. He turned back and looked at me and started barking some more. I let him out and just sat there, utterly stunned. Case notes, file number 512. Dogs are incredible creatures, loyal, full of energy and joy. Some can be quite intelligent too, but this takes it to another level. The only mundane explanation I can think of is that instead of your roommate's dog suddenly and temporarily becoming his species' Isaac Newton, it was your own brain that tricked your senses, making you hear the Husky as saying real words when it was merely normal barking. Of course, truly hearing words spoken would not be normal at all in this context. I've never even heard of a disorder like that, so it's not likely. Still, what could this mean? An animal suddenly gaining speech would be extraordinary. Reminds me of that genius dog in Back to the Future. Einstein was his name, if I recall. Fitting. Perhaps your roommate's Husky will help solve a time paradox too, at some point. Bonus file, written by Automatic Anxiety 739. Secrets of my childhood home in hell. Back in 2001, my parents bought some property to build my childhood home on the south side of Chicago. Some backstory on the property that we found out after the house was built was that the marsh/swamp on the property used to be a dumping ground for bodies from the Italian mafia in Chicago. The black tar that was in the swamp made it impossible to get out of, and the bodies just disappeared. Fast forward to when my family lived there, and we had a beautiful 3-bedroom house with a wonderful yard, a swing in the backyard, and a basement that my parents let us write our names all over, a huge highlight of our house as kids. In that basement, we also had a laundry room that was around the corner of the stairs, and some ballet mirrors leading to it. Ever since I was a kid, I dreaded having to go down to that basement, and always felt like someone was watching me. It was never just a kid being scared of the basement ordeal, something truly felt off. One day I was walking down the stairs of the basement, and out of the corner of my eye, looking through the mirror, a man stood staring directly at me. He was tall, with a flat cap and scrappy beard, plain as day. I tried to scream, but it felt like all the air was gone, just like in a dream. He started coming towards the stairs, and as quickly as I could, I sprinted up the stairs and slammed the door. As a child, I was a wonderfully perpetual liar, and knew no one would believe me, so I never said a word to anyone. A few weeks went by, and I tried to put the image of the man I saw out of my head, but after that, I never felt safe in the house. The scariest instance, though, was when I was grabbing something out of my parents' room and again felt someone staring at me. For fear of seeing the man again, I began to run out of the room. The only thing was, I couldn't move. I stood there like a statue, unable to do anything except cry. I felt a pressure on my chest, like someone was holding me back from moving forward. After what felt like an eternity of being frozen, I finally was able to let out a small cry, and my mother ran into the room and grabbed me. She had to yank me so hard out of that spot, as if I was a mouse stuck in a sticky trap. As we fled the room, the door slammed behind us and my mom took me outside where I felt I was finally able to breathe. After that, we never talked about the moment. Apart from my traumatizing encounter, my younger sister also seemed to be on edge in the house. She could never sleep alone and would frequently scream in the night. This will come into play later. Another thing to note was around the house, things would move locations. Doors would open randomly, and if we all left the house, it was in disarray when we returned, as if someone was partying there. My parents never said a word to us about anything that happened and carried on cleaning as if it was normal. My 3 sisters and I were from ages 9 to 5 at the time, so I'm sure nothing was going to be discussed. Things kept happening over the years, and I would frequently see the man staring through the windows as we came back to the house, around corners, and even sitting on a chair in our living room. Eventually though, we had to move due to my parents losing our house in the recession, but I never forgot about the house. After we got older, we all had dinner one night and reminisced about the old house. I brought up that moment where I was stuck in the bedroom and my mom's face turned white as she told me she saw a tall man with a flat cap and scrappy beard holding me there and did not want to frighten me at the time. As she described the man I saw, everyone's faces dropped. Apparently, we all had encounters with the man. My older sister would see him as she played with dolls in the basement. My dad in his garage, my mom with me, but the scariest story was from my younger sister. When she was a child, the man would visit the edge of her bed and stare directly over her, telling her, "Get out. If you don't go, I will kill your family. You're all going to die. I will kill you." Her screams every night were not from some childhood nightmare, but an actual nightmare we all seemed to be living in. She would wake up with scratches from the man that we just assumed were from her childhood eczema, but nope, he could touch her. To this day, we never bring up the old house or drive past the street where it sits. It still terrifies me today to think about all of our experiences in the house, and I will never ever go back. While it will always be the home I grew up in, I truly consider it a place in hell. Bonus file, written by a very living me. Secrets of what terrifies the dogs. We were staying at a Hogan Airbnb on the Navajo Nation close to Monument Valley, and there were several very friendly, calm dogs roaming around. My friends and I, one of whom is deathly afraid of dogs, had no problem being there with them or petting them. We had a gorgeous view of the Monument Valley right from our front door, and it was cold yet cozy. That night, I needed to use the bathroom and opened the door to the dogs going absolutely nuts. There is a difference between a dog barking at just whatever, a person walking by for example, and then there was this, a total fight or flight response. One of the dogs ran up to me looking anxious and glancing into the desert behind the Hogan. It came close, then walked back to look into the desert behind the Hogan. Its fur stood up and it suddenly looked more like a wolf and took off into the desert at full speed, growling and barking in a huge shadow that ran away from the dog. There aren't many huge animals in the area, some deer and horses, maybe cattle, but this was bigger. I didn't stick around long enough to check what it was. I was pretty shaken by what I saw. Found some fresh wolf/mountain lion prints and hoof prints, probably from a horse, outside the Hogan the next morning. The dog prints are significantly smaller. Our host said we might have seen a skinwalker. I'd like to believe it was a horse. It was dark anyhow, but the host didn't want to talk about it too much. The guides we met later on said the same thing, and kept it at that. Later that day, one friend suddenly fell ill on a tour of another Hogan, and almost fainted. That never happened before in her life. The guide said she probably had some bad spirits attached to her. She recovered quickly after stepping outside. I also believe I heard native chanting shortly after the incident. I had gotten a phone call around the same time, around 2:22 a.m. That would have put the skinwalker experience at around 2:15 a.m. That's all. It was a really wonderful trip overall. I'd go again if I could. Case file number 513, written by Brandon the DJ. Secrets of an extra life from McDonald's. Back in high school, I had this friend. We will just call him Josh for the sake of the story. Josh and I were best friends, and we always joked about how weird stuff would always happen around us when we were together, such as lights flickering, random people wanting to talk to us, things disappearing and reappearing. You get the idea. Well, one night we went on a double date, and after we got home to my house, we decided to grab food from McDonald's. As we were walking out the door, I felt this really weird feeling. It was like déjà vu, but felt very eerie. As I stopped right before walking out, I saw a scene in my mind where I was driving in the car with my friend Josh, and we got into a horrific accident and died. I remember it vividly. He was driving his white Mustang. I was in the passenger seat, and we experienced a horrible car crash at an intersection about 3 minutes away, and we were both dead at the scene. What's weird is I had stopped for probably about 2 seconds, but it felt like I just experienced this whole scene for about 15 to 20 seconds. I snapped back to it, and then my friend Josh said, "Brandon the DJ, I just had the weirdest feeling. I think if we go to McDonald's, we're gonna get into a car crash. I just saw a vision of something where we died." What gets even stranger is he's not a very emotional person, but he was tearing up when he told me. We both slowly closed the door and walked back to the couch, and just sat down, and we just sat there in silence for a good 5 minutes, just looking off into the distance, not knowing what the hell just happened. Has anyone had an experience where you think you avoided your death, or saw your death?